On your side with breaking news and the Tri-State's most accurate forecast. This is 9 News at 5:30.
Good evening. For the first time since convicted serial killer Anthony Kirkland was sentenced to death, the judge in that case is talking publicly about the trial.
Our live team coverage of the day's news continues tonight with a 9 News exclusive. Our Lance Berry sits down with Hamilton County Judge Charles Kubicki Jr., who speaks his mind on the failures that enabled Kirkland to kill again and again. Lance?
Judge Kubicki tells us the Kirkland trial will be among the few cases that will stay in his mind forever, not only because of the emotional testimony and graphic evidence, but because he feels Anthony Kirkland should have never been in his courtroom to begin with. He should have still been in a prison cell.
You always think your imagination is worse than the reality, but in this particular case, the reality was worse than the imagination.
For 2 weeks, beginning in late February, that reality stared Judge Charles Kubicki Jr. in the face from the defense table. A shackled Anthony Kirkland still fighting for his life, long after giving up the fight to prove his innocence. All in a trial that will be remembered as much for its grief as it was for its gore.
There was a lot of emotion every day of that trial. When Mrs. Kenny was on the witness stand, there was a break in the testimony where she started to break down a little bit. And at one point in time, she turned around and she looked back up at me, and her eyes kind of made contact. And I thought, you know what, no mom should have to be going through this.
Emotions for the jurors as well. Initially, they were told that they would decide life or death if Kirkland was found guilty, but only later did Kubicki tell them that wasn't actually the case. A calculated move by a judge wise beyond his just 7 years on the common pleas bench.
At the time, I thought it was appropriate just to try and give him some sense of relief, to say, hey, this is a recommendation, I get to decide.
Tonight, Kirkland sits on Ohio's death row in Mansfield, holding on to hope that his life will be spared by the appeals process. But like so many in our area, Kubicki has questions as to why Kirkland was even on the streets at all and able to kill 4 times, 2 of them just children, all after being released early from prison in 2003, following a 1987 manslaughter conviction.
Had he been kept in prison the whole entire time, served his full sentence, would have been eligible for parole in 2012. Now, based on what we heard at trial, there's no reason to believe that Kirkland, if he'd got out in 2012, would have been any less dangerous. I would hope by now that the parole board would review the criteria that they use as far as who to decide to give an early release to.
Even after being released in 2003, Kirkland struck again in 2007, importuning a 13-year-old child. Despite his criminal past, he did just 12 months, the maximum allowed by law for an importuning conviction.
The judge involved in that case gave him the maximum sentence, 1 year. That judge could do no more. I think there's something wrong there. I think maybe that needs to be changed.
Kubicki, a married father of 2, admits that he also fought off emotions during the trial. But now, for the first time, he was free enough to speak directly to the victims' families.
My sympathy, I mean, I wish I could give them some words of comfort, but I know better. I know that there's nothing I can say or do. The only thing is, I hope for their sake that they can get some semblance of closure out of this, to know that I and a lot of other people involved were interested in justice and trying to do the best we could.
Anything to the defendant, Mr. Kirkland, you want to say?
Nope.
Kubicki also tells us he's upset that the public has no say in who makes up Ohio's parole board, since they're appointed by the head of the state's correction department. He feels that means there's no accountability for repeat offenders like Anthony Kirkland who are granted parole. For more of the interview, you can go to our homepage at WCPO.com.